So if you've presented to DevNet Express before, this content is going to look very familiar to you. We ported over pretty much all of the Intro to Python 1 and 2 modules. I cleaned it up a little bit. I've updated some of the graphics and some of the contents, so it's not as dated. I think everything's Python 3 now, so we're at least at that point. But so if you've presented this content before, it's going to look very familiar to you. But what we need to do is essentially create a baseline for people who are coming in again that have little to no Python experience, just to give them an understanding of what we're going to be doing over the next 2 days. So I will probably just kind of breeze through these slides pretty quickly. If you have questions or you have any concerns about your ability to present these files, just speak up or let me know. I'm happy to go into more detail, but I know that everyone on this call probably understands this content as well as I do, or probably better. So, but what we start off with was, just an introduction to Python scripts and the fact that they're text files and that they can be read by any text editor, and that you don't need a compiler in order to use Python. It's all based on an interpreter. So you load up your text file in an interpreter, and it runs through the various Python commands that have been presented in that text file. So then we talk about what an interpreter is, and then what I'll normally do is, let me just share. Rather than going through the slides, I like to make this a little bit more interactive, and so I will go into either my local, command line, or you can also go into the, let's see, you can go into the environment that they're using. So if you open up Chrome, and that's my, let's see if I can. So if you go into the Learning Lab 2.0 environment, then you can run some of the commands that they're asked to run. So which Python, it'll tell you where the Python is running from. I think that there's only one instance of Python on this. And then you can do the Python version to show which version it's running. And then open up the interactive terminal, and then show them how to get in here and run commands. So, and then I will jump back over here to the slides. So then it's just showing them a different way to get into Python and what we're going to be using Python for. So the directory structure, again, same thing. What we're doing is we're actually, if I exit this, you can show them the main Python script. This is the developer fundamentals, I think, Learning Lab. So there's not much in here, but you can, tree this and show them the files that are in the directory. And then we're going to be working with Python, or the virtual environment. So obviously the virtual environment is incredibly critical if you're developing multiple projects within Python. And it's kind of a hard concept if you're new to understand why you would even want to create a virtual environment. So kind of walking through what a virtual environment is and then how to create one. So we show them Python env, create my virtual environment. Wow, that's slow. There we go. And then source, activate, oh, bin, sorry, bin, activate. And now we're in our virtual environment, and then you can pip install. I don't know if there's a requirements file with this developer fundamentals, but you can show them how you can pip install requests, or at least some Python modules, and then that will be contained within their virtual environment. Sometimes I like to actually go into the virtual environment and actually show them that it's just a kind of a trick of the Linux operating system, that it's, copying and using symlinks in order to isolate this environment within the operating system itself. But for the most part, it's just a glorified file structure that allows you to run a container, I guess, if you will, of your code, and then share, or you can have multiple virtual environments where you can have different projects running, even with different versions of Python. So if we had 2 different versions of Python on this learning lab, you could load a virtual environment up with Python 2 and then another one with Python 3, or just show them how you can install different versions of modules within that virtual environment. All right, let me go back here. And then obviously when we're done, we're just going to deactivate, get out of our virtual environment, and now we're back at the regular command prompt. Pip, I talked about a little bit just previously, but Pip has a ton of the dependencies and modules that allow you to expand the use of your Python script without having to write a lot of code, because you can rely on previously built projects that will allow you to easily import modules into your Python and make use of them right away. There's a ton of them that are out there. We'll be actually working with some of them, including the WebEx Teams or WebEx SDK is a Python module, as well as the threat response. There's an SDK for a threat response that resides within PyPy that you can install. And I think we show them how to do that a little bit later on. Different ways of running the interpreter. So you can just run Python by itself to get into the interactive shell, or you can do the -i to run your script. And at the end of when your script finishes executing, it returns you to the interpreter, so you can continue to run additional commands within the interpreter after everything has been processed. So if you've loaded variables, or you have modules defined, or functions defined, then you can make use of those from the interactive terminal using the -i. Interactive shell, we just showed you. And then there's a quick hands-on exercise. We're not going to go through the labs in this Train the Trainer, but I don't see the link. I'll make sure that the link is in the slides. It's just the developer.cisco.com, and then there's a learning lab for developer fundamentals. These slides are living. They're in SharePoint, so you may see as we present this for real that we might make some minor tweaks or changes based on the way things go, or how much time it's taking to complete various tasks. So and then you're welcome to, as well as proctors, if you find something doesn't flow well, or you want to add anything of your own content into here, this isn't set in stone. You can kind of make this as you want, but at least the framework is here so that you can use what's been presented previously. All right, and then what we do is we go into the various elements of Python. So we start talking about the various data types, and that you don't need to define a data type when you're creating a variable, but the various data types are listed there. So we've got things that you would normally expect to find in a programming language, so integers, floats, Boolean variables, strings, and then you can use Unicode to within Python scripts. I've seen some pretty unique uses of Unicode in people's Python before. We talk about the math operations within Python, and then there's an exercise that follows this where they actually go through and actually use some of these within the lab environment. So addition, multiplication, you can do a lot of different things using that. When we start talking about variables, again, you don't have to define a variable like you do in some other programming languages. You just assign it to a particular, you assign a value to a variable. You can see a couple of examples here. This is another one where I kind of like to jump over to the command line and just start throwing some variables into the command line. It just makes it a little bit more interactive than just walking through the slides with the participants. Then they can see, some of the output that they would normally expect. And you can also get them to kind of follow along with you, or sometimes they'll do this on their own as you are presenting, because the learning environment should be up and ready to go for them. You'll also find that a number of the participants will like to do this on their local laptop. It's okay once we're at this point from the lab environment, but once we get into the next section, it's going to be really difficult to cut and paste from the lab environment into their local interpreter or into their local scripts, and then continue to keep everything updated. And the other thing is we've built the lab so that when it spins up, it automatically loads all of the requirements into the requirements are already built, and so that they automatically get loaded when the container spins up. So if someone was attempting to do this locally, they wouldn't have that list of requirements. And so obviously that is going to be challenging for them to get that list to their local machine. But I mean, it is possible, but I wouldn't spend any time trying to help people troubleshoot, trying to get something running locally. That's outside of the scope of, this training. Then we go into objects and how everything in Python is an object. And so you can make use of the attributes or the methods within that object by using the dot notation. And so there's a couple of examples of using the Python with objects. And then we start going into working with strings. And then the either concatenation of strings using the plus, or you can modify strings. And this is still using the old format. I'll probably fix that so it uses F strings with that third example there. I don't think anybody's using that composition format anymore.
That's useful reference in case they have to deal with some sample code, right? Or with some legacy code that was created by some of the colleagues or people before, or they find something on the internet. Because there are multiple different notations that can be used, and it's good to be familiar with them.
That's probably true. We should probably leave it in there. I agree. There's going to be a lot of examples where they're going to try to pull somebody else's code down and work with it.
But you mentioned the fstring method, right? Also here. So that's pretty important.
Yeah, we cover F strings on the next slide. So this was an addition to the original DevNet Express content, because F strings, when we first built when the content was first built, it was prior to 3.4 when F strings were, or 3.6 when F strings were introduced. So I added this slide to make sure that they understand what F strings are and how to use them, because I can't speak for everybody, but I think most of the development now is using F strings rather than, again, some of the legacy formats. And all of the content within the modules after this use F strings. So they need to be familiar with what they are and how they work. So there's an example of how an F string works, with my quotes from the office, of course. All right. And then the lab has them doing import and export files, as well as using input from the command line. So we go into using the input and print commands. And then we start to talk about conditionals and comparisons. This is pretty straightforward. The content, you can expand or contract the content as you feel it necessary. I think what'll probably be good, Oksana, is if we get an idea, like we used to do for the DevNet Express events, as to what everybody's kind of fundamental understanding of the content is before they attend the event. So we can,
We do. So we asked
Okay.
that question in the registration survey, and I can tell you it's
Okay.
all over the board. Yeah, I can tell you that
Yeah,
already.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
But yeah, when
Which
we
is why
start
we're
in
going
there,
through
it's
this,
just
right?
to sense the temperature in the room, yeah, and see where everyone, there's usually just one or two guys that are proficient with Python, and then the rest that have never used it before.
Never
So-
used it before, yeah. So, and that will give you an idea of how much time and how much to spend on these particular kind of introductory sessions. But yeah, to Oksana's point, I think that what you're going to find is that it's going to be all over the map. And you're going to have people that, regularly write scripts, and you've got people that this is their first time using any kind of Python. So, all right, so talk about conditionals.
I would say, sorry, Brian, so just to do additional here, an idea. So for those, if there are people that are proficient with Python in your class, you can share with them the link to the labs right away and tell them just go through the labs along with us as we go through this content, and tell us if you have any questions, right? And maybe explore more from what you see on the slides and play with it, because it's always about getting more time spending coding for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what will, if you've got people that are proficient in it, you can provide the learning library or the learning lab, and then kind of just let them go. And then there's some other more advanced Python learning labs that are out there. If you just want to point them at those, and they can go through those as well. Again, this is more kind of level setting and making sure that everybody has a fundamental understanding of Python before we jump into it, because once we hit the first module, it gets pretty deep pretty fast. And if they've never seen Python before, they're going to be lost. And we don't want that. Now that we're in person again, that changes things dramatically, because now we can hopefully identify those individuals who are starting to struggle a little bit, because that should be obvious as we're presenting. They're not participating, or they're not following along. We can go and give them a little bit more attention. You're going to have, a minimum of 2 people, and most sites are going to be more than 2 people. And so you can have the one presenter up there, and then the other individual can be in the back of the room, just kind of guiding the people who are struggling a little bit, making sure they're up to speed. Because the last thing we want is for them to sit down, feel overwhelmed, not be able to participate, and then 10:30 in the morning on the first day, they're completely lost and are not participating anymore. And that doesn't help them, and that doesn't help us. And that was really the toughest part, I think, when we were doing these virtually, is that you don't have that visibility. You can't see somebody struggling, and you couldn't go over and help them get comfortable and caught up. But now that we're doing these in person again, I think that'll change things up quite a bit.
What's a good
Right.
sign? What's a good sign that someone's struggling? Like just like smashing their head against the desk and pulling out their hair. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
Sorry.
or you look over their shoulder and they're browsing Reddit or something. I mean, there's a lot of, most people will just kind of sit there, right? And they're just not actively participating.
I know.
So you might want to just go over and I mean, you've
Yeah,
done this a long time.
but you make a good point though. I mean, to being able to do it in person is huge because it also gives us a
Yeah.
lot more opportunities to sit down with the students and talk to them more about students, customers, right? Talk to them more about what they do on a daily basis. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's definitely going to help us out is that we're going to have you can have those kind of one-on-one sidebar conversations with people to make sure that what we're presenting is relevant for what they expected to get out of this. If they're going to go back and try to implement some of the things that we talk about, threat hunting or doing SecureX orchestration, then that the fact that they walk out of here and have code samples or they have a better understanding of how to use some of the APIs that we're going to be talking through that's going to be critical. Yeah. Freddie, do you have a question?
Basically, a comment. In those scenarios, when you have someone that looks like is lost in the space, the best way to encourage them to get back to the idea is to try to put some use case from their own ideas. They can figure it out how to use the tool, because at some point these hello world exercises tend to put the people in a lost mindset because they don't find a relationship between why they write that code and what they want to do at the end. So if you bring to them some ideas, some use cases, some past experience, they will get the concept quickly and move along with that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. Yep.
Yeah, so some examples I use a lot is some smart home automations. I just use my own home examples usually, right? And my husband's example, who hates scripting, but he started scripting when he needed to automate something at home, like we have the lights that can go like on and off from my phone, or I can use Siri and voice over. He coded all of that and he scripted all of that, and he learned all of those if then else and other things because he really wanted to get it working. So yeah, that's that. I mean, I just use those kind of examples, anecdotal examples for people during these labs. And another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, we have Kahoot quizzes for each module. I was going to convert them into Slido because we have Slido now. So we will have quizzes at the end of each module. And it did get some swag from SecureX Marketing that we will be shipping to locations, T-shirts for all attendees, as well as some mugs for the winners. And I think Brian has some prizes as well that we will be distributing for those who complete the quizzes. First
yeah,
to
and that'll
third
help
place.
again keep that. We didn't do well. There are some events where we did that, but for the most part, we didn't do any kind of attention keeping exercises when we were going through these for the DevNet Express events. I think that helps just kind of pull people back together, and they're competing for something, and then they get prizes, and so at least as we're going through this, they're engaged at that level. And then just making sure that they're still engaged when we're going through the modules is key. All right, we'll finish this up real quick. There are speaker notes for the majority of these slides. So if for some reason you are struggling to come up with your talk track for these slides, you can just refer to the speaker notes. All right, functions. Obviously, functions are incredibly important. We're going to be creating a separate functions Python script, but what that allows us to do is anytime that you have a snippet of code that you plan on using more than once, you probably want to make that into a function. And what you'll see during the exercises where we're doing this for real is that we create things like authenticating to the API, generating a token, and then we take that token and then we use that token in other functions later on. But if you're making a call that you expect to do multiple times, create a function, and then you can pass it, as you can see in the first example, you can pass it some variables that you can use within that function, and then the function can return some sort of output after all of the computations or the call is completed. And then you can use that in the rest of your script. All right, and then we get to the hands-on exercise. The hands-on exercise is in the developer fundamentals track or learning lab. This is slightly different. If you did the DevNet Express content, where we had the fortune cookie exercise and we had another exercise, I don't remember what it was, but this has been rewritten a little bit. There's still some of that basic, define the type of this particular variable, or going through some arithmetic exercises, so adding, subtracting, that type of stuff. This is really the fundamental, just kind of creating variables, writing conditional statements, and then you can create a small function, and then you call that function, which is just a math exercise. And then this takes probably, it says 15 minutes. I think that's about right. I went through this pretty quickly, but if you've got people that this is their first time utilizing Python, it might take them a little bit longer, but there's not a lot to this exercise. And then you can do this after the allotted time. So what we would do normally is give them the time to complete the lab, and then take the 5 minutes to go through the script after the time has expired, right? To show them what they should have come up with, and then just to run each of the scripts and see the output that they should expect. There is solutions for each of these exercises as well. So if for some reason they get held up and can't figure it out, then they can just go into the solutions and then copy and paste the solution into their running script, and they'll be ready to go.